The way I'm connected to the temple is I was a volunteer here, oh my God, like 8 years ago. I'm so old. It's so long ago. Yeah, I did like a lot of stuff here back in the day, and then I just haven't visited as much because I was at college. But yeah, and then you're all Indians here, so usually I think Indians tend to be very numbers oriented, so you usually like to know numbers and stuff. So I'll mention all my stuff later on. I'll mention my SAT score, my GPA, and all that stuff, just so you know a bit where I'm coming from. But just know that I'm going to be completely transparent. As we go along, if anyone has any questions, just say them out loud or like raise your hand or something, and I'll call your name. We'll work it out. Let's see. Before we even get started, I will also go through some disclaimers that are very common misconceptions. First and foremost, a lot of parents are entirely connected with like the college name. So like let's say I went to like Harvard. People are like, oh my God, you went to Harvard. Like your college name after you graduate actually means nothing at all. It like means so little what you end up doing. I know people at Berkeley where I'm like, wow, you're really stupid. And there are people at Harvard that are also equally stupid. And you're like, the college name means absolutely nothing. There are people that go to much lower schools that do much bigger things. Like Steve Jobs went to like Reed College. No one even knows what that is, all right? So a lot of parents have this tendency to stick to like what the college name is. Just know that that actually doesn't really matter. Your child or you yourself will go to wherever you want, but as long as you're passionate, you'll be surprised by the things you accomplish. There's also no magic formula, and there's nothing I'm gonna say here today that's gonna get your kid into college that is like a magic, oh, it's gonna work. It's all this like mindset change that I'm gonna talk about, and let's see, what is that saying? Yeah, mindset matters more than anything. So what are colleges looking for is probably the first question you should answer. And you know, I've never been on the admissions committee of a college, but having gone through the admissions process like twice now, I know that colleges are looking for these things for sure. First thing is creativity. They don't really want anyone who doesn't know how to solve a problem. Everyone wants to know that the student they're taking on is willing to address any big problem that's going to happen. Resilience. Anyone who doesn't know what resilience means? Anyone know what resilience means? It's a big college word. It's an SAT word. Oh, they don't have big words on the SAT anymore, but it's a big word. So what does resilience mean? Anyone? Yeah, ability to take, right? Like, so resilience is so critical. Like in college, you'll fail so many times, and when colleges look at your application, they're looking for your ability to be able to pick yourself up from every setback they throw your way, all right? Anytime you fail, how many times can you get back up? There's actually a famous, like, Chinese proverb. It's like fall down 7 times, get up 8, because they always want to see you get back up. And most people don't know that. Most people are like, well, I'm always just been bad at this, so I'll always just be bad at it. Colleges don't like that at all. They want you to be able to take a failure and address it. Curiosity. No like great discovery in this world was made by someone saying this is too hard. Okay, right? Like think about Albert Einstein. He was like called an idiot by his 4th grade teacher. All right, but what happens is people who are genuinely curious about the world are the ones that end up making a difference. No one wants someone who can solve any problem that already has a solution. You need to get your own problems and then solve them. And the only way you get your own problems is by being curious and questioning everything. Innovation, that's also a big one as well. Not only being able to solve problems, but being able to come up with creative solutions. We're like literally in the Silicon Valley, so you guys know this better than anyone else, right? We have like a computer in our pockets now. That wasn't a thing 20 years ago. So that's all innovation. And so, I mean, obviously no one here is going to make like an iPhone on their own, but that is something that colleges look for, like your ability to innovate. And problem solving is something that is kind of mentioned there. So those are the things colleges are actually looking for, but there's no way I can just look at someone and be like, wow, you look like a curious person. There's no like magic thing that tells me who's curious or who's innovative or who's creative. So the way they actually gauge this, and I mean, we can talk about why this is problematic all on its own, but they do this through 3 main things. I mean, GPA, which is your grade point average, what grades you get, because people who get better grades, they think are obviously more creative. But you'll see that that's not always true. Steve Jobs had a 2.0 in high school, right? Steve Jobs I'm referring to a lot because he went to my high school, so I know him. But so you'll see that GPA doesn't really matter as much. The second thing is extracurricular activities, like what do you get yourself involved in? Because that is also a good measure of creativity and innovation. So if you like start your own club, or if you're really involved in things and you're passionate about them, how you're staying involved there. And the last thing is this stupid thing called the SAT/ACT. I actually teach for SAT and ACT, so I know the test inside out. I just think it's the stupidest test in the world. Like, if you've taken the test, you realize it means nothing at all. There's nothing on the SAT that's, wow, you're really smart. There's just like the stupid test. It's like you read a passage and answer questions about it, and it's like, what are you actually testing? I just think it's just the silliest test. But there's also the AP classes and honors classes, which I think mean a bit more. But basically, those things at the bottom are how colleges gauge the things above it, okay? That's all I want you to know. Because colleges don't actually care about your numbers. They're seeing how those numbers reflect the qualities above it. And med schools do the same thing. Medical school is actually way more intense. You'll see medical school interviewers actually ask you about these characteristics all the time. And then you guys are all here because you want to go to college, but just so I restate the fact that you all should be going to college, it's really good because most of us know college is good, and that's why we're going to be great. But some students, believe it or not, actually think it's a good idea not to go to college. And I'm like, that is also a very, very bad decision. You will not have a job. By the time I am out in the workforce, or any of your kids are out in the workforce and they didn't go to college, you're done. Like, there's nothing else. Maybe our parents would have gotten away with having a high school education and being able to start a business and getting lucky. That's not happening anymore. College is the new high school. If you don't go to college, you are so far behind that it's not going to happen. All right, and not even college. So college is like the new high school now, right? More people are now doing PhDs, masters, medical degrees. Like, that is like the higher reaching part now. So it's not just college that's necessary. Usually going above and beyond that is also necessary. College is also the gateway to bigger and better opportunities. I went to Berkeley. That's a 35,000 student school. You can think, do you know how many people 35,000 people is? My classes have 800 people. My class, for chemistry, would fill this lecture hall 3 times over, okay? But the point is, you meet a lot of people. You'll meet people that are way wiser than you could ever imagine. You'll meet people that you'll be like, wow, that's different, right? So it's a gateway. You meet a lot of people. The connections you make is one of the biggest reasons I also say that. Networking, obviously, and expanding your comfort zone. When I first got to Berkeley, my mom's right here, but I came home every week because I was like, oh my God, life is scary. But eventually, by the time I was at the end of my year, you really learn to step out of your comfort zone. I was doing my own laundry. It was great. I was learning all these things that I never had done before. But college is where that happens. It's this independent learning thing that you need to do that's so much bigger than just the education you're getting, okay? And the last thing is just you have no college, again, just don't bother. You just go to college, okay? That's all I'm saying, all right? And now this next slide is probably the most important slide of the presentation, because I think every single person in this room falls into the left side of the board, including the parents. And this is something that all of you need to change, because a lot of, it's a problem in general in society, but more so with Indian parents, and about this thing called the fixed mindset, which is my son or child is not good at math, and he has just never been good, and therefore he will never be good at math. It's this belief that things are innate and not going to change, which is unfortunate, but I think it's because the system kind of makes you think that that's how it works. The other thing about the fixed mindset is I am good at this, therefore I will always be good at this, and therefore I should just major in something that I'm good at. That's a problem, guys. If you stick to that mindset, you're going to see life becomes really difficult, and that also affects your ability to get up when you fail. Because now when you fail, you're just I'm just bad at it. At Berkeley, I meet so many students that get a bad grade on a test, and they'll be like, "Oh my God, I studied so much. I don't know what I did wrong. I'm just so bad at chemistry." And I'm like, "Is that really your reason?" That's the worst excuse I've heard in my life. Some people are like, "I studied so much." And I'm like, well, clearly not if you didn't do well, right? There's no way someone can look me in the eye and say they studied that much, and I'll be like, well, your grade says otherwise, so you did not study that much. You want to see studying so much? My first year of college, I was staying up at 4 a.m. every day because I was that afraid of Berkeley. That's studying too much. I was not sleeping, all right? I was in class and my eyes would just randomly be twitching because I was not sleeping enough because I was studying. That's studying too much. And at that point, I ended up doing obviously great, because I was studying. But I see people all the time, they're like, I'm bad at chemistry. I got a bad grade on my test. And I'm like, well, how much did you study? They're like, I don't know. I studied a lot. And I'm like, that doesn't mean anything. All right? And then the other thing is, once people fail, they just accept it. They're like, I'm just bad at this subject. And I'm like, that's also a horrible way to go. Because now what are you saying? You're saying that, oh, you're just bad? That's your excuse? Right? So I'm going to encourage you to switch over to the right side, which this is research done at Stanford University, by the way. Look, Stanford, big name college. They think the right side is much better. You as parents have a big say in this, and so do you as kids. Growth mindset is this ability that you can do things even if you're bad at them initially. Okay? And most of you are immigrants. You came to a completely new country. Right? There's no way that the growth mindset doesn't fall true for you. You learned a new language, you learned a new way of living. That's the growth mindset. All right? That's entirely applicable to your normal life. Okay? Same thing, I just got contacts recently, and my mom was like, you're bad at putting on contacts. You're never going to get it right. And you want to know what I did? I proved her wrong, because all I did was I practiced, and now I put on contacts in 2 seconds. That's the growth mindset. Whereas my mom was like, you're just bad at it, you're never going to be good at it, and you should just not get contacts, all right? So it's applicable to every part of your life, but more so school. Because what happens in school is, I actually was never into science. My first ever, D in school, in middle school, was in biology, okay? And then what happened was I still find it interesting, and so in high school, I just worked at it, and then I brought those D's up to A's, and then in college I did even better at Berkeley, and then now I'm going to medical school. So that's the growth mindset, all right? Any person who says that I'm just not good at something needs to change their outlook. And that is the number one thing that will separate your kid from the rest, all right? Because believe it or not, 99.99% of people fall on this left side. I have people that still come up to me and they're like, I'm just bad. And I'm like, well, are you studying harder for the next test? They're like, I can't do anything about it. I'm just bad at it. And I'm like, okay, well, I don't know how to change that. If you're not willing to even adjust or even adapt, I don't know how to get there. So that's the main thing I'm going to talk about today. So the structure of today is if you look at the bottom, this is actually, unfortunately, bad contrast. I didn't know how bad it would be. But at the bottom, there are 4 main things. I'll talk about starting from middle school, going to high school, and then college, and then examples of friends I have that got into good colleges or bad colleges, and then we'll talk about what it's important. I'll go over the middle school mindset, the high school mindset, and then the college mindset, and just kind of talk a bit about how everything can benefit you. So first and foremost, middle school, I know a lot of you guys have younger kids, so this all starts very early on, but if you're not in middle school yet, you can still implement these changes. First of all, middle school is where you need to innately adjust to just getting used to studying. I think the barometer for most people who study is very low. They're not used to it. You need to get that innate aspect of studying down quick. And what I mean by that is don't make your kids stay at home and study 8 hours a day. That's not necessary, but they need to know you need to maintain a certain level of credibility, okay? And that's obviously grades is a good barometer of that. I have parents that will not let their kids leave the house, which is actually the exact opposite. Don't do that, all right? Your kid does not need to spend every second of every day studying, but your kid does need to know studying comes first. Priorities is school and then everything else, all right? So if your kid is struggling in something, then yes, he or she should probably study a bit more, but don't lock them in their room. Because what you'll see is, the second thing I'm also going to say is, given that most of you are probably engineers, judging just from demographics, early exposure to science, math, and computer science at this point. That's my cousin over there. He's already learning Python. I don't know what Python is, but it's a computer programming language. He's in 7th grade. I have never taken a Python class in my life, but you guys should all probably, early exposure to these things that are changing the world is probably a really good idea. If I had been exposed to Python in 7th grade, it would be really well now because computer science is probably going to be integrated in every part of your life by the time you're out of your career, or you're doing your career. Science and math obviously is a big deal because, it depends what you want to do, but usually medicine, engineering, any big profession like that requires understanding of science and math. So that's what I'm going to say there. Obviously, I'm totally not against anything else. Let's say your kid has this massive fascination with art, develop that, all right? Don't go against your kid and be you need to be an engineer. That's the stupidest thing I could think a parent can do. It's inhibit your child's actual passion. Whatever they want to do it, but if they don't have a direction already, then I think CS, science, or math is a good way to go. Okay, the second thing is being motivated just purely for the sake of curiosity. A lot of you guys learn too much for the grade, which is kind of stupid to say. A lot of people, oh, it's so funny. I meet so many people at Berkeley, and it's the exact opposite thing they do again, where once they get an A, they're like, I know this so well, I got an A. And I'm like, really? Let me ask you a question. Like some people will be like, I got an A in biology. And then I'll be like, cool. And then I'll ask them a biology question, and they just don't know how to answer it. And I'm like, what good is your A if you don't know what the hell you learned? Like, it makes no sense, all right? And that's funny because the system has set it up so that most people just want to get that letter grade so they can say, oh, I know this. But they don't actually know it because they're motivated entirely by this random letter that's going to mean nothing in 50 years versus the actual knowledge that is, all right? So you need to get this aspect of curiosity within your kid. Your kid could be getting straight C's, but if he or she can still retain that information and actually like regurgitate it or tell you why he or she likes it, that's so much more important than like getting a 4.0. Honestly, it's not, a 4.0 is not even that impressive if you have someone who doesn't know what they're actually doing. So getting that aspect of, just in middle school, because in middle school is where grades come about, but in middle school, if you can get your kid to start seeing beyond that, or you can get your kid to start realizing there's so much more than just the grade. You know, like let's say you're doing, I don't know, biology is always my go-to example, but if you're doing biology, maybe asking your kid questions about like, why do you like it? What are you learning? Like, what does that mean? Like, asking them questions like that is so much more important than why did you fail your last test? That's like the exact opposite, because now you're like focusing again on the grade rather than focusing on the actual stuff they're learning. So getting them to start being able to speak their thoughts is very early on. Yeah, so exactly. As a parent, asking why to your kid is much more important than asking like your grade, right? So asking them, what are you learning? Why do you like it? All that stuff in middle school is something that you can implement relatively early. And then basically the main hallmark I will say is like by the end of middle school, studying should be like second nature to you. And what I mean by that is your kids shouldn't be studying all the time, but if you ask them to sit down and study for 4 hours for like this random test, they should be able to do it. This aspect of like, oh, I know how to study and I know that studying is first should probably be a big priority, because that's the number one thing. A lot of people get into high school and college and they don't realize like studying should be top priority, which I think is one of the things I've realized that a lot of students need to do at an early age. So if you can get all this stuff in just in middle school, you're already way ahead. And I think honors, some middle schools have honors classes now. So if you want your kid to take honors classes, that's fine with me, but honestly, it's much more, honors classes can help with that innate curiosity. You know, because honors classes will challenge your kid to think more deeply about it. But if you're taking the honors classes just for the grade, that's, again, a very silly reason. But if you're trying to take these honors classes to kind of incentivize them to think more deeply about things, that's a good idea. Okay, middle school. So this was middle school academics. So I talked about the academic side of middle school. Here's some extracurriculars. EC stands for extracurriculars, by the way. Extracurricular activities, a.k.a. something that's non-academic. In middle school, try everything once with an open mind. Okay, when I was in middle school, I had like the best middle school experience. Because again, I was not stuck in my room studying all the time. I knew that studying was a priority, but I was actually out like playing with my friends like every day. We would go to like play basketball, we do all these things. And because of that, I actually I did math club, I did running, I did basketball, I did like all these activities. And what that allowed me to do is realize like, what do I like doing? So like I started running in 6th grade and I haven't stopped since. So like being open to all, I mean, I never went back to math club. I never liked math club, but I tried it, right? So trying everything once and seeing what works and kind of exposing. So again, don't like be that inhibitor parent who's like, you have to play tennis, okay? Like that's not a good idea, but maybe sign them up for some tennis classes and see if they like it. Or even basketball and stuff like that. I think the exposure to sports is a big deal in middle school. Again, because trust me, colleges don't care about academics as much as they do, like, what else do you do in your life? Because colleges are going to assume your kid knows how to study, because I'm telling you, good colleges, like Harvard, all those big colleges, which I know all of you are probably thinking about, like Harvard, Stanford, Yale, all these big schools, they know every person who's applying there knows how to get a 4.0. They don't care about that. They care more about, like, what sets them apart. Are you, like, the next Magic Johnson? What are you? How are you different? Okay, and so exposing yourself to sports and like really trying things early on is something that for me made a big difference. I think that for me in my career, wow, I can say career. That sounds horrible. my time as a student, I realized like the things I like the most are not the classes, it's more the sports I learn. I learn a lot more from sports. Like I've been running, right? So running is a really good metaphor for life because I started out running like 11-minute miles, and now I run like a 4:30 mile. So that progress of determination and hard work paying off, I saw that in running first, and then I just applied it to everything else. And I was like, if I can do it in running, I can do it anywhere else. Because running is like the most mentally challenging thing you will ever do. Many of you probably can't run for more than a minute, but I can run for well over an hour and a half at like a really fast pace. So like being able to got that foundation pretty early, and that what I learned in running, I literally applied to everything else, and it's something that you could do just by exposing yourself to these activities. And yeah, you'll see the resilience, determination, and hard work. Remember those three things colleges are looking for? That's actually much more embedded in sports than it is in academics. Any one of you who knows sports knows that you'll have, like Vinith, he's another cousin, but you know basketball, right? Let's say you lose a couple games, picking yourself back up, getting better. Anytime you realize someone says you suck, you have to like be like, no, I don't, and then you have to get better at it. So like you're always going to start in ground zero in sports and work your way up, and that's a really good metaphor for school. And then last thing I'm going to talk about is the mindset in middle school. Obviously, have fun. Middle school is probably about as easy as life will ever get as a student. All right, it's not getting any easier than that. Having good grades should be innate. Like you should have good grades. I think getting good grades in middle school is not a challenge. Anyone who says middle school is hard is clearly doing something wrong. All right, I have middle school teachers who will literally sit with your kid for 3 hours and make sure they like get an A, if your kid is willing to sit down for 3 hours. All right, middle school academics is not challenging. So making sure your kid has the grades prioritized, but if they have good grades, believe it or not, the first thing they should be focusing on is like really actually having fun and seeing what they like to do. Because guess what? You're going to be studying for the rest of your life, but you're only going to find out what you like in middle school. And then once you know what you like, you have to stick to it. Yeah, you don't need to study like 50,000 hours a day. You really don't need to study that much in middle school. I actually would highly discourage it. I will say, though, do not waste your free time. And what by that I mean, do you know, I read this study. Kids are spending a lot of time on phones. Just this phone is on their face all the time. That's a waste of your time. You are doing absolutely nothing with your life in that moment, looking at other people's Snapchats, all right? That is like the worst thing you could do. On the other hand, going outside and running, or going outside and playing something, or going outside and even just socializing, picking up people skills is so much more important. So yes, having fun means getting out there, but it does not mean sticking your face on your phone for 3 hours. That's a waste of time, all right? Because you can do that for the rest of your life, and I promise you'll realize it's still a waste of time. Another cool thing you can do, and I'll tell you a story about a friend. He comes up later on, but one of my friends started a board game. He just made a board game about chemistry in middle school because he had help from his parents, obviously. He didn't just like do it, like I know how to make a board game. But like his parents were like, oh, you want to make a board game? Like, let's do it. And they like did that as a project, and he like made a board game. And like he went to Stanford. That's all you need to know about him. The fact that he made a board game in 6th grade, I knew right away he was going to go somewhere. What is everyone else doing in 6th grade? Like literally like going to the bathroom pretty much, right? And this guy was making a board game. And so making sure you're like putting that time to like creative use and fostering whatever your kid likes to do. Like let's say your kid likes, I don't know, arts and crafts. Then like sending them to Michael's like every Sunday for like their arts or craft day is like a good investment of your time. But yeah, take that phone away, please. Don't give them a phone. So let's move on to high school now. This is actually where stuff gets real. This is where all the college stuff comes in. Because nothing you do in middle school affects your chances of getting in college, but everything you do in high school does, which it could be a benefit or not a benefit, up to you. High school academics. So if you did well in middle school, you got to keep that up. Like if you did well in middle school, you are officially ready for high school, but you have to keep it up now. That's the hard part, because now high school introduces this new thing called AP classes, honors classes, all these things, which actually are a lot more challenging than you might think. But they're not more substantially different than middle school. I never actually thought high school classes were that much different. The only reason why high school can be misconstrued as more difficult than middle school is because teachers don't hold your hand as much. In middle school, it's like, oh my God, you failed a test? Let me help you. In high school, it's like, you failed a test? Go figure it out. Like, you have to go to the teacher and ask them why you failed and all that stuff. In middle school, if you fail, the teacher will be like, oh my God, this looks bad on me. Let me help you. In high school, they don't care. they're already making too little money. So they honestly don't care if you fail. And it's even worse in college. I told you, my chemistry class was 900 people, right? Half of those people fail, and the professor never even knows their name. The professor, like I'm the professor, if you guys were all my students, I would never know like 99% of you. I honestly would just never know you. But you'd still take my class, and I would give you a grade, and most of you, if you fail, even if you came up to me crying, I'd just say like, sucks. That's life, live with it, right? That's how bad it is in college. That's the part about college that makes it so drastically different, because now there's like no handicap for you. You're on your own. And anytime you fail, you're going to retake the class, and that F is going in your transcript for sure. You're not changing it. But in high school, I've had friends who get Fs, and if they work like really closely with the teacher's willing to do it, but the student takes the initiative there, right? So you're learning that at an early age. But high school is not substantially different academically than middle school. The high school formula for success is the academic part has to just be given. And that's what I meant, like getting that foundation of studying done at a very early age is important, because that will pretty much establish that foundation, like studying will still come first in high school. And once those academics are still given, then you can actually start focusing on what stands out, okay? Because believe it or not, when schools look at applications, they look first at your numbers. And what I mean by that is like they'll look at your GPA and SAT, and if they're not high enough, you're automatically disregarded. I don't care if you're the next cancer cure in the world. If you don't have the numbers, they don't look at you. It's the same in medical school as well. Medical school focuses a bit more on your college GPA and then MCAT scores, and if you don't have those two, you're not even getting your foot in the door. Which is, I mean, you can say what you want about it, but that's just the process, okay? It's kind of stupid, I totally agree, but that's unfortunate. So you need those two things for sure. But now you want to, let's say your academics are working out, and most people, by academics, I would say above a 3.5 GPA is probably a pretty good idea. For really competitive colleges, let's say you're thinking like UC Berkeley, UCLA, any Ivy League, like 3.9 plus easily is something that should be on your mind. I'll tell you my GPA. Let me tell you this, first of all. I only took 3 AP classes. So for all of the parents out there that are taking like 20, that's not necessary. I took 3. And I pretty much just got a 4.0 in high school, all right? Because first of all, I didn't take very many hard classes, right? But I was able to do well in them. And so Berkeley was like, okay, well, this guy clearly didn't challenge himself very much, but it's like, at least he knows that academics come first. But what you see is the thing that actually set me apart, at least I believe, in college, was what I did outside of academics. Because there are people at Berkeley I met, my roommate. I get to tell you about my roommate in Berkeley. This guy's like the smartest guy you will ever meet. He knew more the first day of Berkeley than I do now. That's how smart he was. He had a 2310 SAT. He took like 15 APs, and he went to the same school I did. And now he's off to medical school. But the point is, everyone comes in with different varying expectations, and most people at Berkeley are the ones that take tons of APs and they think they're going to be perfect and all that stuff, but you don't need that, all right? You definitely don't need like all these APs. You do need good grades, but you do need SAT scores. But you'll see that with all these top schools, the numbers are kind of assumed. It's assumed that you will have the numbers, and now they're looking at what will make you different. Because Harvard, any school will turn down tons of people who have perfect scores every year. Like the guy who had a 2310, he could, like, if you had asked me in high school, I would have thought like he was going to go to Harvard. But Harvard and all these big schools, they don't care about your numbers, because once they know you're smart enough, now they're looking for what sets you apart. And this guy is like the most prototypic Indian guy ever, and he never did anything else except study. So Harvard was like, we don't need that. We have enough great Indian people. We need an Indian guy who's going to actually do something different. So that's what these like big schools actually rely on. So now let's talk about getting yourself to be unique. Yeah. APs? Oh, that's what I'm going to talk about them. So this is just the academic part. Okay. Oh, you also want to know my SAT score and stuff. I'll tell you that. So I took APs and honor classes. You want to take subjects that only your kid is interested in. Don't like impose your like love of computer science on your child. That's not necessary. Okay. Like just don't be like, I love biology and therefore you should also love biology because you are my child. That doesn't make sense. That logic is flawed. But if your kid likes biology, like I only took AP classes I was interested in. I only took biology, chemistry, and calculus. Because I was like, okay, I like math and science. I had the opportunity to take history, but I'm like, I could care less about history. There are parents that will be like, no, take every AP class imaginable. And I'm like, oh my God, I really hope I don't have to do that. Because if I had to take AP US history, I would have failed. I hate history. Like, I don't want to learn about that. There's other people that take AP computer science and all that stuff. I was just not interested in it, so I didn't take it. So if your kid is interested in it, definitely like push them to do it, but don't like tell them like you have to take a set number. There's no like necessary formula for that. Quality is definitely better than quantity. As I told you, I only took 3 APs. 3 is very, very low because most of you are from Fremont or like Cupertino. The average there is like 7, I'd say. A lot of people go pretty crazy with these APs. But when you do take those APs, going above and beyond is what is the most necessary part. So like getting A's in those APs, even though they're difficult, is a much more important thing than taking 5 APs and getting B's in all of them. That's pretty silly. And I will also say, while you're learning these things, you also want to go back to not focusing so much on the grade. I know it's so hard because the system focuses so much on the grade, but you have to fight against it. The classes I did the best in were not the classes I tried to get an A in, even at Berkeley. I finished with a 4.0 at Berkeley as well, by the way. So like at Berkeley, the classes I got A's in, which were mostly all of them, I did not focus on the grade ever. The grade was never something that entered my mind. I focused on knowing everything that was ever told to me and like going farther than that. So in biology, you learn about the human body, right? So I focused not on like, what do I need for the test? I focused on like, I want to know everything here. Even if the professor says I don't need to know for the test, I don't care. I wanted to know everything because I was driven more to learn everything than to learn just for the grade. And that actually took me a lot farther than most of my classmates. And applying it to the real world. So anything you learn, like let's say you learn about business, applying what you learn in that business class to like something like Facebook or what you see in the real world is like really important. Because a lot of students, the thing they struggle with is the connection. They're like, oh, this is just in the textbook. And I'm like, but you know it's applicable to the real world, right? And they're like, no. It was just in the textbook. So they have this like disconnect where they think that this textbook and real world is entirely different when there's clearly not. In high school, I was also in FBLA. So like doing like things like that where you can kind of apply what you're learning. FBLA is a business place where you can kind of do business competitions. So I did public speaking there. So now, as you can tell, I'm pretty good at public speaking, primarily because I did that in high school. So focusing on applying real world skills and getting real world skills. Like this really stands out. The people that have this innate curiosity that don't just learn for the grades will come. Like you will get an A for sure if you focus on knowing everything you need to know for biology instead of just knowing the bare minimum you need to get an A. So you will. But the people that stand out is because they get so into it that they are driven more by curiosity and then they want to just like step outside. Like my friend like loved biology so much, he ended up doing like high school research in like some lab at Stanford because he was like, he knew so much about it. And they were like, oh, you clearly know enough, like join our lab. And he did research as a high schooler. That doesn't happen for most people. But this person is driven entirely by curiosity, and that means a lot. And now let's talk a bit about this SAT problem you guys got going on. They changed the SAT, so it's out of 1600 now. It's kind of stupid. I hate this test. I hate this test so much. No, I'm good. I hate this test so much. It doesn't do anything, but unfortunately, it's one of those things that you just got to do. The SAT is not a measure of intelligence, so don't think your kid is stupid if he doesn't do well on it. Like, that's totally not right. I mean, no, don't think your kid is stupid in general. I think that's bad parenting. But the SAT is not a measure of intelligence at all. I would argue that even like those letter grades, A, B, C, and D, are also not a measure of intelligence. SAT is just a very silly test, but you can learn how to take the test and do well on it, and you'll realize it has no correlation to like what you actually know. And perfect score means nothing really. I know a lot of people. I have a 2400 friend. Back when the SAT was out of 2400, I had multiple people I knew who got 2400s, and they all ended up going to like Berkeley or UCLA. I actually had a friend who got a 2360 and he got rejected from Berkeley. Because want to know what happened? I kid you not. He got a 2360 the first time he took it, and his mom was like, where are those last 40 points? And so he had to retake it, and the second time he took it, he got a 2110. And I was like, your mom is like, holy cow, I would never want to deal with that. 40 points. This guy was 40 points away from a perfect score, and his mom was like, not willing to look that he was already like in the top 0.1%. She was instead like, why aren't you number one? And I was like, that is the worst advice I've ever gotten. But my parents know him. He literally went to UCLA. He didn't get into Berkeley, and he had like insanely high SAT score and SAT and GPA, but he didn't do anything else. Let me tell you about my experience. There's also this other thing called the ACT. I encourage you to take both for your kid. You'll see that some people like one more than the other. I took both. I took the SAT and the ACT twice. First time I took the SAT, I got like 2,000. Second time I took it, I got 2,200. So then it's out of 1,600 now. But the point is, that's like, first time I took it, it was like top, I don't know, like 15%. Second time I took it, it was like a bit higher than that. I also took the ACT twice. The first time I took it, it was very similar. I got like the equivalent of a 2,000, and then the second time I took it, I got the equivalent of a 2,200. So for me, the two tests were very similar, but I took them both twice. So there's no harm in doing that. You can take both tests as many times as you want, and I think now colleges will just accept the one that you want to send to them. So if you take it multiple times, let's say you got 26, let's say you get like a 1,200, 1,500, 1,800, and then you get like a 2,200, you can just send the 2,200 and not send any other ones. I would, however, focus more on getting just above a 2,000. Right now, the SAT is out of 1,600, so getting above a like 1,350 is enough. Like, you're done. You don't need to take it again. Same on the ACT. The ACT is out of 36. Getting above a 30 you're good. You're fine. Those are all top 15% scores. Because the United States is a really stupid place, believe it or not. Like, the average score on the SAT is like 1,400 when I took it out of 2,400, and that was like because of not this area. You're in a very lucky place because this area values education so much that we think like 2,000 is a bad score, and that's already like top 10%. So you're fine, okay? Yeah, I took both tests twice, and you should definitely take them more than once if you need to. Now let me talk a bit about my extracurriculars in high school. Yeah, you have a question?
When you mentioned that you are in a better place here, isn't it rather working for worse for people because they're competing against others who have more than 2,000, and that's why you be too?
Well, no, so it's negative if you start comparing within yourself, yes. But compared to the rest of the United States, just the fact that the barometer is so much higher here, do you know what I mean? Like, you're surrounded by people who will tell you, like, oh, you need to get like a 2,000.
Then you're competing also with the people who are applying at that higher rate, right?
Well, I mean, you're competing against the rest of the United States, right? Everyone from the United States will apply to the colleges that your kid will apply to, right?
Isn't it more people applying from this area when you talk about UC Berkeley?
No. UC Berkeley just has a lot of people from this area because this area is so, like, up there. Like, the barometer is so much higher. That's why a lot of people from this area goes to UC Berkeley. But UC Berkeley gets applicants from all around the world and also the rest of the United States.
But when they compare you,
Yeah.
they compare you.
No, they compare you to the rest of the United States. Yeah, hands down. They don't have the time to be like, oh, they go to the same high school. Let's see which one's better. They don't have time to do that at all. They have time to say the average in the nation is this. Wow, this guy is above average. Let's look at him further. That's all. They definitely compare you to the rest of the applicant pool, not just people in your state. Okay, that's a good question, though. Thank you. Extracurriculars. I told you I started running at a very early age. I loved it, so I stick to it. And to this very day, the number one thing I got out of high school was my running experience. It's just so great. I learned to stick to it. I learned that hard work pays off. And to this very day, when I'm really stressed out, I still run, because that's my stress reliever. So really focusing on getting a sport that you're interested in. Or I also play a lot of basketball, but I wasn't it was a hobby. It wasn't a sport for me. I did cross country and track a lot more. And then here's the part that a lot of parents also get wrong. It is much more important to be really, 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 really good at one thing than to be kind of good at a lot of things. All right? You'd be so surprised. I interviewed at medical schools now, right? And there's always some people that get into every school they interview at. And I was like, what is so different about these people? And they all have this one thing that they're really, 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 really good at. So, they might not be perfect at everything else, but they're really good. So there's this, I'm going to talk about it later on. I have a friend. She's the best cellist in the nation, and she goes to UC Berkeley. Just the best cellist, all right? I have, I'm not trying to be mean, and I'm also not trying to be braggy, but I have higher grade GPA and an MCAT score than her, okay? We both interviewed at Harvard Medical School. We both interviewed there. She has lower numbers than me, but she got in. Because what these big schools look for is, how is this person different? Because everyone will have the numbers, so your extracurriculars are the things that kind of make you stand out. And so being really, 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 really good at one thing, being the top runner in California, is insanely more amazing than having the highest SAT score in the nation. Because being the top runner in California is wow, this person had the grades and they were able to do this. So a lot of parents are you should do all this different stuff. But I say, yeah, do all that stuff, but really, like in middle school, you know how you explored what you were interested in? Like you have to stick to those activities and then really stick to one. So for me, that one was running, and I like really stuck to running. And I like really liked it. And by no means was I like the best runner in the nation, but like I was still like a very good student, and I was a pretty good runner. So they were like, wow, he like knows how to balance his life, and he clearly knows that studying is not everything, which is a pretty important realization. So picking one thing and really sticking to it, I would say is really good. Don't like scatter yourself. Don't spread yourself too thin. It's much more important to pick one thing and stick to it. I have people that, I don't know, make their own companies in college now. And, you know, as you can tell, how do companies work? Well, people stick with one thing and they try to be the best they can at it. Like, think about, I don't know, Apple. Apple just focuses on this entire aspect of, I don't know, a phone or a computer, and they try to be the very best at it. Apple doesn't like, we want to provide healthcare now. Like, they don't try to like spread the whole market. They pick one thing and try to be really good at it. That's just the way society runs. So you as a person should try to think about that as well. And when you start doing these activities, you need to start seeking out meaning in them. Don't just do them for college. Do them like, what are you going to talk about? Because when you talk about this activity for college, they want to know what you got out of it. So like for running, I started realizing very early on that this was a sport that was teaching me a lot of skills that I would not have gotten otherwise. And so kind of I realized that, and I was able to like talk about it. So like, let's say you're doing like a club, really talk about like, why are you even in this club? Are you just here for college? Because that's a really crappy reason, all right? You really want to talk, like I'm in this club because, I don't know, I had someone who had bone problems and I really wanted to know more about it, and so I joined bone club or something. I don't know, orthopedics club, right? So like having this motivation behind something is important because you're gonna have to talk about that when you apply to college. Let's see. And as I told you, what not to do is like spread yourself too thin. So doing too many things. Oh, you have a question? Yeah. 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 Mm-hmm. No, yeah, again, so they don't have the time to see what every school is offering. So they don't have time to see if you took all the APs that your school is offering. But I do agree that some schools offer way fewer APs or way more than others. And in that case, like let's say your kid is very interested in calculus and there's no AP there. One way to get around that is community colleges. So you can actually take college classes as a high school student, and that also is something you can do. But usually they don't look at it in the sense like, oh, your school offered 12 APs and you only took 3. My school actually offers like 15 and I only took 3. So they don't look at that. They look at which ones you did take. And believe it or not, you don't have to take the AP class to take the AP test. So the AP test is what you get credit for. Like that's what shows colleges that you took the AP class. So you don't actually have to even take the AP class. I had really overachieving Asian friends that would not even take the AP class and just take the AP test because they just studied on their own. So you can do that too, because the AP test is open to everyone. And so people can take it without taking the class. Yeah.
Do you also take the subject as SATs?
Oh, is this for middle school? Oh, SAT 2s.
Yes.
Yeah, take them in the classes that you took APs for. So I took SAT 2s in biochemistry and math because I took biochemistry and math APs. Yeah, good. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Oh, it's phenomenal. AB is amazing. Yeah, that's fine. That's amazing. As long as you take what you're interested in and you do well, it's way more important than taking what is the highest thing out there. So taking AB and getting an A is amazing. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and when you do an extracurricular, really think about your story. For every college you apply to, you have to have a personal statement. A personal statement basically says like, why do you want to go to college, kind of, and really think about like, how are you building your story? So for medical school, you know, I made my story because I've had a lot of heart problems in my family. So I was like, okay, that's what kind of inspired me to go into medicine. And then I kind of tied it together with my passion for teaching and learning and really interacting with others. And like making sure you have this story done is a big part of it. And I think the most impressive part that you can do in high school as an extracurricular is having like side projects. So side projects are these things that you're invested in that you're kind of doing on the side on top of school. So one of the smartest friends I have now, he's a product manager at Microsoft. In high school, He's a product manager at Microsoft 2 years out of college from UC Santa Barbara. So again, I told you, college name doesn't matter at all. He's literally managing people who went to Ivy League schools. There are people under him who went to like Harvard and Cornell. He's like 10 times smarter than all of them. And the reason why he's so smart is because in high school he did these like side projects. So he didn't really like school that much. So he spent all his time like he created like this like website where people can type in their stats and it would give you the likelihood that you'll get into a particular UC. He like did all these side CS projects because it allowed him to kind of literally apply what he was learning. And he didn't get the best grades, but he did these side projects and that really helps him. Now he's at Microsoft. So all these side projects really do help. And so I guess the mindset here that I'm going to talk about, the high school mindset is, I told you already, fixed versus growth. You still want to like flourish this growth mindset. High school is probably the first time you might fail something, although the first time most people fail something is in college, and realizing that even if you fail something, you can still kick butt at it if you stick to it. Okay, let's see. So the main point here that I think I've gone over is colleges, again, want creativity, they want resilience, they want curiosity, innovation, and problem solving, and they're kind of gauged by these other random GPA, SAT, and all that jazz. But the other thing is some colleges will consider also your essays. So you're going to write essays from every school you apply to. So making sure you can write things really well is a good deal. They will also consider your other experiences. And unfortunately, or maybe fortunately, they also consider the background you're coming from. So if your parents went to college, that puts you at a disadvantage, unfortunately. Because what that means is they look for people that, let's say neither of your parents went to college and you went to college, that's a massive accomplishment, right? So sometimes that will actually overcompensate for a lot of other things. So there are a lot of people that will end up going to these big name schools primarily because they're the first person in their family to go to college. So there's all these like other small factors that factor into your decision, into like whether they will accept you or not. But I think at the end of the day, the main question they're asking them is, are you a lost investment or are you a good investment? Because it's a business, right? So they're going to ask yourself, can you handle university rigor? And if they think you can, and if you've done everything I've said, I'm sure you'd show them you can and they'd accept you, all right? Because at the end of the day, you're an investment for them. If you drop out, that tells them that they made a bad decision. So they need to know that you won't, and making sure that their investment pays off. So I guess overall conclusions is like you don't have to be perfect. You work towards attaining these unique characteristics I talked about, and you want to focus on developing whatever you're passionate about. Okay, you don't have to be like the next Elon Musk, but you do have to focus on certain things that you're interested in. At least try. And with that, actually, wow, I ended up perfectly on time. It's about 12. Yeah.
I have a question for you.
Yes.
Luckily, I've seen you from the childhood. But I have a question for you because I don't know this. So one of the things I take away from here is, one of the things that you did is figured out that applying is more important than learning, and applying is more important and underscore applying.
Yeah.
When did you click? How did that click into you? At what point in time did it click into you?
It was at Berkeley. It was actually after high school. At high school, I was actually very numbers. Actually, at the end of high school, I had this teacher who he was like, you guys need to like learn for the sake of learning. And I was like, this guy's full of himself. I just want to get an A and pass this class. But I think in Berkeley, I started seeing that, like there's all these people around me that are way smarter than me numbers-wise. And I got really scared by that. And I was like, you know what, screw this. I don't want to like try to compete with it. I just want to learn everything to the best of my ability and focus on how it relates to me. And lo and behold, that ended up like working out way better because most other people did not realize that. Most other people were still caught up in like, wow, look at me, I have 15 APs, I'm the best. And so they don't come out of that bubble for a while. But because I was so scared, it kind of worked to my benefit because I was like, you know what, screw the numbers, screw all of this, I don't need to look at it because it was kind of discouraging me at the time. I focused more on just applying and learning everything to the best of my ability. It was at Berkeley for sure, yeah. And I think I knew it worked because of how well I did at Berkeley. I knew for sure that was the way to go after I started seeing the results. But yeah, it definitely take a while to hit home.
What would you redo in high school?
Just that aspect of not caring so much about the numbers and not caring so much about the grades and like really just focusing on what I want to do. Which, I mean, I wouldn't do anything too differently. I'd still take the same classes because I didn't like force myself into anything. But like, I think I would be a lot more less grade focused. And more focused on like, wow, this is really cool, or this is interesting, because I think that would have like fostered my like intellectual ability to think a lot more. Because I think I still find myself fixed on certain things, and I'm like, wow, I'm thinking about it the wrong way. So like that really opened up avenues. Yeah, I'm almost done, and then and then I'll open it up for questions. So I want to thank everyone. First of all, obviously, Baby P, SVM, NYS, the president of Baby P, Nathan Prerak, Divyang Uncle, and Selma Uncle. Obviously, Divyang Uncle is he's like a mentor. He's been there through thick and thin. He's actually the one person I remember when I started here. He was the person who also introduced me. He's always asking me what's going on. He knew me since middle school, and then he knew me in high school, and then he knew me when I got into Berkeley because he also went to Berkeley. And he's always just always excited, always talking to me. I love it. He's even when I got into medical school, he's just so happy for me. So he's always been there for me. It's always good to, and that's why he was the first person I contacted because I always like doing these things. It's always good to at least reflect on your own experiences so other people can learn. And so I really thank him for the opportunity to do this. And obviously Ravi Kaka, Shashi Kaka, and Hemant Uncle, Sanjay Uncle, and my dad who helped coordinate this. Thank you. And obviously everyone else is part of the team. If you guys all want to take out your phones, you guys should take out your phones. You can take out your phones right now because I'm going to show you something. Because you also probably want to write down my email. But I also have a YouTube channel. So if you want to go to YouTube and write my name, you'll see that I actually make videos on college help. I also make videos about my personal medical experiences and just what I've uncovered. So everything I talked about today is embedded within my videos. I have a lot of videos on there. I think I'm at 100 something. Hey, I get to talk about this too. So I started this channel, right? A YouTube channel. That's different. And so I started this channel 6 months ago. This was after I started applying to medical schools already. And I was like, okay, this is a cool thing. I wanted to create the channel so I can use it as a way to reflect on my own experiences as a doctor eventually. And so I was like, okay, I want to create this channel and I'll talk about stuff that I'm passionate about. And I created the channel. And I only had 67 people following me at the time. And I was like, okay, I don't really care. It's for me. And then I ended up telling Harvard and Yale and everyone because you can send them updates about what you're doing. And I told them, hey, I made a YouTube channel. And right after I sent them that, they all offered me interviews. And my hypothesis is this is different. No one creates a YouTube channel when they're going into medicine. You know what I mean? No one does that. So they saw that. I was making a ton of I do a lot of science videos on there too. They saw that. They're like, this is different. And even in my interviews at Harvard and Yale, we talked about this. One of my interviews was so blown away. He's like, wow, this is so cool. This is so different. What is this? Because most people in medical school, they just talk about research, and they're like, oh, wow, look at me. But when I showed them this, he's like, wow, what inspired you to do this? It really caught their attention. So doing thing like this is just kind of hit home again. It kind of shows you it's way more important to stand out in a different way. And I didn't do this to stand out, but lo and behold, it was a great way that they thought, they were really impressed. I was like, you're really impressed by this? There's not many people are watching me. They're just no, this is the coolest idea ever. Not a lot of people do that. And now I'm at over 330 followers now on YouTube, so it's slowly growing. But the point is I started it as this impulsive thing because I wanted to reflect on my experiences, and now they think it's this really amazing idea. So it's you gotta do things that help, right? But yeah, I think that's it. This is the end. So if you guys have any questions now, I can answer them. Yeah. Story. I was born and my grandpa was wow, he's gonna be a doctor. And so I mean I wasn't it was just always something, it wasn't imposed on me, but everyone would just inadvertently be talking about it all the time. But then I guess I started taking biology in 7th grade. I really liked it. I really liked it. I was this is so much cooler than everything else. And so I went into high school liking biology more, and I kind of developed that a bit further. And then I went into Berkeley thinking I was gonna be pre-med. But even at Berkeley, what I did was as I took the classes, I was yeah, I can see myself being a doctor. So it kind of it was this thing that was initially just a joke, and then it happened. So yeah, it was something that has kind of just been there. But I made the actual decision in 12th grade when I applied. Yeah. Yeah.
What did your daily schedule look like when you were in high school? Because what I see with my daughter is most time is spent doing the homework.
Yeah.
By the time you're done, you're kind of exhausted.
Mm-hmm.
So doing extracurricular, sometimes I see it doesn't work out.
Yeah, no, that's a really good question. I was lucky because sports were always such a big part of my life that my average day in high school was you wake up at 6, you go to school at 8 to 3, but I did track and cross country, so my day didn't end until 6 every day. So I would go to track and cross country practice at the end. So I didn't have any room to really say I was exhausted because I already would come home at 6 and now I have to do the homework anyway. So it's I would end up staying up until 12, 11, or 1. But the point was I was just so into this routine because the extracurricular was already in there before I addressed the homework. You know what I mean? So the only problem is if you do that backwards, it gets difficult. If you try squeezing in extracurriculars when you're already struggling with homework already, like trying to fit everything in, it's hard because now you're like, I already don't have enough time for homework. How am I supposed to do all this? But the cool part is maybe I would recommend trying to create a schedule where maybe your daughter tries to incorporate extracurriculars such that by the time she gets home, she's already done them. So now she has to do the homework anyway, like she's gonna have to do it regardless, and she's gonna be exhausted regardless, right? You're gonna be tired. By the end of the day when you go to bed, it's a pretty tiring day anyway. So trying to get those done early is something that I really liked. Because for me, it was never a choice. It was like I came home at 7 and I had to do the homework. But the problem is I came home and I would have done these extracurricular commitments already, so I kind of had them embedded into my schedule. Yeah. Yeah.
At what stage at Berkeley you started kind of preparing yourself to going into the medical school and start preparing for that? And the other question is like, did you get any external help from any mentor to guide you towards that?
Yeah, good question. So at Berkeley, I went in with the presumption that I would be pre-med. So you take certain classes in college if you want to be a doctor, and you have to do those classes. So I took those classes, and I did well. So my barometer was like, okay, I'm still on track. And then I took the MCAT, which is the entrance exam. But I will say medicine is not something you can kind of just like tiptoe around. You can't be like, I kind of want to be a doctor, but not really, because they will weed you out. The process of becoming a doctor is so insanely challenging that you have to be all in when you're in college. So I started pre-med and I was like, I'm all in. Like I have to commit to this. Because believe it or not, there are people that will go in thinking, I'm kind of want to be a doctor. No, you're not making it past first year. You're gonna die. Because it's that hard of a curriculum, and on top of that, you have to pass the MCAT. On top of the MCAT, you have to like do 50 other things. Like there's so many hoops to jump through that if you're not committed, those hoops start wearing you out and you won't do it. So yeah, if you want to be a doctor, I would say you have to definitely go in with like, I'm all in the moment you go into college. But I think in high school, it's good to start thinking about it. At least, like, do you really see this? Because believe it or not, like 80% of people who go into college, all of them want to be doctors because they think it's so easy. They're like, I want to be a doctor, it's the best thing. And then they'll realize, like, oh, there's too many hoops, screw it. Like, they don't want to be a doctor anymore. So you have to really know how much it's going to take. And I would say if anyone's thinking about medicine, it's a 10-plus year commitment after undergrad, okay? Like, right, and we just got my financial aid package. I'm going to be in $200,000 of debt in 10 years. And then I have to pay it off. So actually more than that. But yeah, the point is it's a big financial and temporal constraint on you. And what was the other question?
Did you take any external help, mentor, counseling to guide you?
I think the best help you can ever have is from friends who are doing the same thing. Because even me, there's no way I can actually help any of you really because I've already done it. But when I had someone doing it with me, it was like the best thing because I was like, hey, what are you doing right now? And I knew he was in the same shoes as I was, my roommate who was also pre-med, as I told you. And so he would help me a lot and I would help him. The community surrounded by is the best. Having someone who's like, you should do it this way and this way is always a bad idea because that person's not doing it right now. Like me trying to tell someone how to be a doctor in 10 years is the most like horrible thing I can do because when I did it, it's going to be completely different when they're doing it. So surrounding yourself with a network of people is good, but anyone who's a doctor already is always good. So if you have doctor friends, they can probably offer advice. It's not as meaningful though. Yeah.
What extracurricular activities did you do at UC Berkeley?
Oh, at Berkeley. What did I do? Oh my God. I wrote this down from my application a lot. I did a lot of teaching. So I taught a lot of science. So I taught undergrads. So I teach hard upper class science to undergrads at Berkeley. Another thing I did at Berkeley was so if you go to like a big research institution like Berkeley is, you do some research. So if you're interested in science, I did a lot of like science pipette research and that stuff. And then the other thing I did was I did a lot of peer mentoring. So I created this student organization where people mentored each other, and that was fun too. Mostly just research, which you might not understand because research is more of like a college thing. But I did research, teaching. Oh, and I did a lot of community service. Yeah, Rotaract. You guys know Rotary International? Rotary International is like a big Indian. It actually is very big in India, but it's an international club. I did a lot of community service. That was also good because it kind of lets you see stuff outside of academics. So doing community service is always important, for sure. And I still played basketball and I ran, but that doesn't count as an activity anymore. It was just like a thing I needed to do if I wanted to stay sane. Yeah. Oh, wait, yeah.
Two questions.
Yep.
What are the three AP classes you took?
Mhm.
Second one, like when you're younger kids, they like to try out different things, right?
Yeah.
I'm sure you did that same thing, but at what point do you kind of focus on one thing? Is that be good at one thing versus scatter yourself?
That's a good question. I took AP biology, chemistry, and calculus. Maybe I took AP government. I think I took AP government too or something. Okay, I took 4. Okay, well, still not that big of a difference. Let's see. And then what was it? When did I find out what I wanted to do? It was like, it's a click moment. You know, like for me, that click moment happened like, because I've been running for so long, but I'd just been mediocre. But then I started getting better at it. And I knew that this was something I wanted to do. So that click moment comes when you really like resonate with an activity you're doing, like you're really passionate about it. That doesn't have to be a sport. It can be a club that you started and you want to make this club the biggest thing on campus. Like you have to really just figure out what you want to do. And if you're really passionate about it, then that could be like your one thing. But you just have to figure out like where your passion lies.
Yeah, but I mean, for you, but what point, like, is it in middle school, high school? Would you think is it the right time to focus on those?
High school is definitely a good time to start narrowing it down, for sure. Middle school is like you can do whatever you want. High school is a point where like pick your top 3 and like really make it happen. Focus. Well, for me it was in high school also. Yeah, for me it was in high school, but that was just because I had a really good track coach, and he kind of motivated me a lot. But it depends entirely on what you're doing. But I would definitely say by high school, pick a couple activities that you want to focus a lot more on than everything else you've been doing. Yeah, and then I think him, and then we'll go. Yeah. Yeah.
He did all that thing, but ultimately, but one of the main things what he mentioned is his coach in high school for the running. He was very good. He motivated him so well, right? And then from there, I think.
Yeah. Did you have a question? Yeah, I taught. That was actually, yeah, so when I taught undergrads, that was actually a paying job. So it's like a tutoring job I had. I also just taught for like free sometimes to students, but when I was a tutor at Berkeley, I got paid for it. So I was actually working, I'd say like 15 hours a week. But it was like good because it was stuff I had learned already. So it was like a good way for me to like just regurgitate information I had learned and get paid for it. It was a pretty solid investment. But I wasn't getting paid that much. I get like $15 an hour. It's pretty crappy. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, wait. Did you have a question there? Yeah. Someone over there had a question, then we'll go to you. Yeah. I actually didn't. When I was in high school, they only had like bad phones. They didn't have the iPhone. So I had like a flip phone. It's harder now because now you have much better phones. Because on my flip phone, I can't do anything. Like I opened it up to call people. That's it. So it's a different thing. I had an iPod Touch, and I used to play like the games on it sometimes. But it wasn't nearly as big as it is now. There's no problem using the phone on your downtime. I would just say like when you're doing something, just like focus on what you're doing more instead of like I'm on my phone all the time when I'm at home, which is fine because I work and I do phone stuff and all that stuff. But let's say I go outside, or if I'm running, or if I'm doing any sort of activity, it's important to focus on that and see what you're doing there instead of being on your phone. And I think it takes a lot more internal constraints. I totally agree. It's harder as a parent to be like, don't use your phone because your kid will do it anyway. So I think it takes a lot more like you have to kind of teach your kid like you should probably stop this. You're like wasting your life. But yeah, it's hard. I don't know. I'm guilty of it too. Yeah. And then you had a question? Yeah.
So what if you're doing like all these different extracurriculars in high school, but you like really enjoy them, but you don't want to just choose one like you said earlier, like you want to stay in all of them?
Well, that's a good problem to have. Then just stay in all of them, because then you have good reasons for it. If you're just staying in all of them for college, that's pretty bad reasoning. But if you legitimately think you like all of them, and you have reasons for them, just keep doing it. It's fine. That's fine. But most people don't have that problem. Most people are not passionate about that many things. Most people are just like, I'm doing this for college and that for college, and I'm like, well, you can probably cut those out. Yeah.
How many volunteer hours did you do?
Did I do?
Volunteer hours?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think over 1,000 in high school, because I was here. This was 200 plus here, and then I did. Oh yeah, I did like the NYS thing I told you about here, 200-ish, and then I had 200-ish in like a hospital, and then I was in Interact, which is a community service club. I had like 200-ish more there. Actually, it wasn't 1,000. 1,000's too much. I'd say 700 something. Yeah, I think I kept track of them on like a log, which is probably on my computer somewhere. But I definitely did a lot of service, yeah. So that's different schools. Some high schools have requirements, but there's no like requirement for college. You don't have to give them like a certain number, but you can say like you did certain activities for a certain number of hours. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, you have one. Okay, let me get to you after her. Yeah.
If there are three things you have to look back and change it,
Mhm.
what are some of the three habits you would change, or you could have changed that would have helped you?
Yeah, this is I told you my first year I studied too much, which is you might think that's perfect. It was actually kind of bad because I like didn't make that many friends that as I wanted to. So I would definitely like that work-life balance is something I didn't get to, and I'm trying to do better even in medical school now. But that's something, yeah, really making sure that you're just not studying all the time, which I think is really funny because most parents don't have that problem. It's the exact opposite. So really getting the balance is important. But you'll see that even being too much studying is also pretty bad, right? So that's one thing I would change. Another thing I would change is just like not taking things so seriously. Like I thought the SAT was like this test that was going to change my life, but it doesn't actually matter that much. So I put this big emphasis on it, and it's scary, but it's actually not that big of a deal. And then the last thing I would change is just, I don't know, that's just like staying true to what you like, staying true to like who you are. Because I think I was always in that trap. I didn't realize until college, like I was doing things for college, and it was like clearly a bad reason. So sticking to what you like and showing people why you like it instead of just doing it for the sake of doing it.
Just an extension to that question.
No.
I think most of the Indian kids have that kind of a dilemma, and they do have this kind of a verbiage.
Mhm.
We have parents who are pushing us,
Yeah.
and I think it goes all across, not just the Indian community.
Yeah.
In your case precisely, how did it work?
I actually had parents that didn't care. It's really weird. My parents are a complete anomaly. Even to this day, my friends are like, dude, your parents are so weird. Because compared to like most parents, I was like, my parents were telling me not to study. You can like ask them. I was like, they were like, dude, you need to like get out of here and like go do fun stuff. So I had a complete anomaly. But I had the way most of my friends do it, or the way they get around it is really just being honest with their parents. I think that's the number one thing, because it's like it's a generation gap. Like most parents are immigrants from India probably, right? And that's why they have this belief of certain things, and then you come here and you kind of think that it's the same, but it's completely different. So trying to get on the same page and understanding where your kid is coming from, but also your kid having the knowledge of like where you're coming from. And that's so hard to do because no one ever thinks about the other person's perspective. But know like your kid is in an entirely different place than where you might have gone to school. So relating that to like what he or she may be going through, and same with their kid too. Like in high school, I think it's important for the kid to be like, I really like this, and I don't want to study as much right now because I'm going to do this. Like being open about it is the best thing I could say, for sure.
So basically sort of the open communication.
For sure, yeah, which is not actually as common as you think between kids, yeah. Yeah. Uh, wow, this guy's thinking ahead. Oh, in college? No. Oh, you're in college. Oh, dude, you look young. Nice, good for you. I studied for my MCAT. I mean, just like I've studied for everything else in my life, just by knowing everything. Like there's no like formula for it. You get books, right? My goal, I got a ton of books, and I was just like, by the time I take this test, I better have known everything in these books. And so I did every single book I found, and I kind of did all the practice problems. So Exam Crackers, TPR, Kaplan, I had all those books, and I kind of did all of them. I also did a lot of, what was your other question? That's how I studied for the MCAT. Oh, letters of recommendation. There's never too early of a time to ask. You can ask your professors whenever. You can literally ask them after you take a class with them and be like, can you write me a letter of rec for med school in 4 years? They'll say yes. And now once they say yes, they're bound. So you just make sure you keep reminding them when you actually have to write the letter. Yeah. Okay, cool. Well, I'm here if you need anything, but thank you all for coming. I hope this was helpful.